Well, welcome back. It is a bright, sunshiny summer day as I record this video here in my offices on the beautiful campus of Georgia Southwestern State University. I look out my window and I can see the lake, and I can see through the trees, and I can hear the folks outside cutting the grass with their big ZTR mowers. Perhaps in the course of recording this video, you will hear the lawnmower come by. In fact, here it comes right now. Hopefully it doesn't get to be too loud to where you can't hear and understand what we're talking about here. But we shift our focus now in our class to chapter 6, which deals with sourcing. You'll remember from chapter 1 when we talked about the overview of getting people to join our organizations, that sourcing deals with the concept of finding the sources where our talent lies. Sources lie, I guess, rather than lies, to be grammatically correct. The idea here is that in the past we could just rely on putting an ad in the paper because most of the folks that we were hiring came from within a few miles of where we are, and we could simply rely on people to walk in the door and ask about jobs. But today in our global economy, we can't do that anymore, especially if we have jobs that require particular skills and talents, because that doesn't necessarily exist within 3 miles of our door. So we have to figure out what we're looking for, what skills, what talents, what knowledge, what backgrounds, and we've got to figure out where to find those people, and we got to go to them. So in order to go to them, we've got to know where they are, and we got to know what sources are the best places to find those people. So chapter 6 deals with the sources we can go to. And the first part of that in this series of videos that I'm doing, 6A, says that we can look internally for candidates, and then 6B and 6C talk about how we can look externally for candidates. For a job that is open within our organization, there may be some people already working for us that are going to do great in that job, and we don't have to go outside and look and hire and bring somebody in and train them. We can just move somebody from within our organization to a different stage. Remember, as we think about sourcing, one really important idea is that people who never apply for our jobs do not ever become employees, right? You cannot have somebody working for you who has not started the process of trying to work for you. So if we only can hire people who have applied, we've got to get the right people applying. We can't leave it to chance. As we said at the beginning of the video here, at the top of this slide, sourcing is identifying our recruits and locating them, identifying who they might likely be, and then locating where they might be. In order to get the right people, at the bottom of the slide here, we have to go to the right places to look for the people that we need, and then we've got to use the right tools to educate and to attract them. So the burden really is on us now, where in the past the burden was on the candidate. If you want to work for us, come find us. And if you don't come find us, that's your tough luck. The organizations that take that approach today are missing out on great people. We're having to be proactive rather than reactive in terms of finding people to work for us. We skipped a couple of slides there. There we go. And frame all of this, both in terms of the 6A video on internal candidates and the 6B and 6C videos on external candidates, that there are different types of people who might actually be candidates. This is a great thing to learn, not only for test purposes, because you do have a couple of test questions related to this slide, but also in terms of real life application. 3 types of job seekers. First of all, we have the active job seekers. Those are people who really need a job and who are out there trying to do something about it. As a college graduate, you are going to become, probably, most of you, active job seekers. The only reason why you wouldn't be an active job seeker is if somehow you managed to line up a job before you graduated. So there is a smooth transition. But at some point, you're actively working to try to get a job. Active job seekers, people who realize they've got to have a job. Maybe they're already working somewhere, but it's not what they're looking for. and they're really trying hard to find something better. They're out actively applying, they're sending resumes, they're filling out applications online, they're doing networking, they're looking for information about job openings. Now, what does that mean to you as a candidate? It means that you're really spending a lot of your time, it is your job at this point to find a job. You're unemployed, but you're, in effect, right now, your job for a lot of you, some of you are already working, have a full-time job, but some of you, your job is school. But once you graduate, your job is going to become finding a job. And once you find a job, your job is going to become that job. So you're constantly in some form or fashion of job or another. The active job seekers from the perspective of the employer, the company, is that these people, I hate to use the word, but it maybe kind of paints the picture that we're kind of looking at here. People who are active job seekers, in some sense, are kind of desperate. They don't have something that is fulfilling. Maybe they don't have something at all, and they really need a job with the income to pay their bills and to do the things that they want to do. So what we know about active job seekers is that the old saying of beggars can't be choosers kind of applies here. If we've got somebody applying for our job who's an active job seeker, they're going to be a lot more flexible in terms of what we offer them. We might be able to hire an active job seeker for less money than we would have to offer to hire somebody who already has a job. And that kind of makes sense. If I've got a job and I'm reasonably happy with it and I'm making money, the only thing that I've really got to do if I change jobs is to get a little better circumstances. But it would have to be probably, in most cases, better than what I've got for me to make the consideration. But if I don't have a job, this may not be my perfect ideal lifetime job, but it is something. And I'm willing to take what I can get to some degree. So an active job seeker, people who need a job, who are looking actively for a job, the benefit of that to us as an organization is that it might be a little cheaper. We might can get them on the lower end of our salary range because they've got to take whatever they can get. The second category of job seeker is the semi-passive. Those are people who might otherwise be active job seekers. Semi-passive are people who probably have a job right now and it's okay. I'm content. If something better came along, I would move on it, and I might look every now and then for what else is out there, but it's not something that I spend all of my time doing. A semi-passive job seekers, you see, people who are interested in a new position, only occasionally, however, actually go about the process of looking for one. So once in a while, I'll kind of dip my toes in the water to see what it feels like. I'll throw a few resumes around, and if something comes of it, that's great, I'll pursue it. But if nothing comes of it, no big deal, I'm okay where I am. If we get a passive or semi-passive candidate, we may still be on the lower part of our salary range, but it may be a little higher than what we would have offered to an active, because we've got to do better than what they've already got. The third type of job seeker is the passive job seeker. That's somebody who's employed in a role that they like. They're not looking for something else. But by golly, if you come up and you slap me across the side of the head with a 2x4, you'll get my attention. It's going to probably take an awful lot to get me to change, especially if I'm not actively looking, because that means that I'm not really interested in going anywhere else. What that means for us as organizations is two things. Number one, the fact that they are working, the fact that they're happy where they are probably means that they're developing where they are, and they're going to be really good candidates for us. So we're going to get really high quality people. But the other side of that is that because they're happy where they are, because they're making a pretty good salary that is such to them that they're not looking for something better, we probably, as we look at our payment range or our salary range, have to pay them on the higher end of the salary range. So we'll have perhaps in the candidate pool some active job seekers that we may have to ask why you don't have a job right now, but we can probably get a little cheaper. We might have some semi-passive that are whatever, and we might have some passive that we've got to really kind of lure you in. You're happy where you are, you've got a good salary, you've got good benefits, you've got a nice title, you've got other perks, you've got good responsibility and good opportunity for growing, and why would you possibly leave unless there's something that's almost too good to be true? And so in order to get them, we may be forced to make it too good to be true. As you see at the little sub bullet down there at the bottom, a lot of these folks are the better candidates, but we got to be willing to pay to get them. It may be really difficult. So now when we think about those kinds of people looking for jobs, let's spend the rest of the PowerPoint here and the rest of the video lecture talking about internally how we can identify people who might be good candidates for our jobs, or where we might look to find them. First of all, one thing that we ought to be doing anyway is what we call succession management. That is an ongoing process of recruiting, as you see, evaluating, developing, and preparing employees to assume other positions. So the idea here is that we've got these people working for us, they're in their roles, and we're stepping back and we're thinking, you could be good in these other roles. Maybe next year, maybe 5 years from now, maybe today. But chances are pretty good that if you're in this role right now, that there's a reason why you're not in that role, but you're in this role, because you're missing something. So we're thinking about where you might be able to go with your career development, and we're helping you to develop the skills that you're missing. And we're thinking proactively about who is going to succeed whom. We've got a director of marketing that we know is not going to be here forever. So rather than waiting until the director of marketing decides to leave and then figuring out what we're going to do about it, we're saying, you know, one day this is going to happen. So let's look now at who's in our organization that might be able to move into that role, and what do we need to do between now and then to get that person ready. So as we look at individual employees, we're looking at where they could go in our organization. We're identifying the possible paths they could take going up through the organization, you know, achieving promotions and increased responsibilities along the way. As we're identifying what those paths might be, we're looking at the skills they're going to need, and we're helping them to get those skills by training and giving them assignments. And you see that it's really important that it's a continual process, because what we see you potentially doing today may not be the same thing that we see you potentially doing tomorrow or next year, because some of the paths that are potential for you today may no longer exist tomorrow, or there may be new paths. So it's a continual process of looking at individual employees and planning what they could do and identifying the needs that they have. So succession management is a great way that we can find internal employees who can take on new responsibilities or promotions or new roles. Another thing that we can do is called a talent inventory. It's a database. It might be an Access database, it might be an Excel database, it may be some specialized software from a vendor. But the idea is that we've got, if we're thinking about it in terms of an Excel spreadsheet, we've got one column with all of our employees, row by row by row by row. There's 200 rows because there's 200 employees and they're all named. And then out to the right of that column, we've got other columns with specific pieces of information. Like one column may be what degree they have. They've got a bachelor's degree or they got a master's degree or whatever. One might be what the rating was on their 2017 performance appraisal, and what the next column, the rating on the 2018 performance appraisal. One column may be the number of words they type per minute. One column may be their latest customer survey score. One may be the certification that they got on the forklift training. But there's all these different things. Maybe there's a column that's very subjective, and we score them from 1 to 5 in terms of their outgoingness or their decision-making capabilities, or anything that we think might be useful in making decisions about who could take on new roles with our organization. So once we've got these databases with the employees and all the columns with information that has stuff keyed in for each thing, so this employee has got something keyed in each one of these different columns. The idea here is that once we've built this thing, now we've got a good database of who has what. So we've got a position coming open that requires a very outgoing personality, it requires a very high level of decision-making skills, requires proven ability to work in a team, it needs a master's degree, and it needs somebody with a personality score of 80 or higher. Now we can, if we're using Excel, go to that column and we can put a filter on it that says above 80, and we can put a filter on this one that says masters, and we can put a filter on this one that says personality score of 4 or higher, and that kind of hides rows of people that don't meet those criteria. And what we ultimately have left is a list of hopefully 5 or 6 people that meet every one of those criteria, and that becomes our pool of people that we can consider for this position. So the talent inventory. An inventory is a listing of things. If you go to a hardware store, when you do inventory, you're counting all of these bolts, and you're counting all these nuts, and you're counting all these weed eaters, and you're getting a cumulative total of all these things in all of these different categories. Talent are those skills that you have that make you able to do certain things. So a talent inventory, again, is a database of all of the different things that we call valuable and who has those things, existing in a format where we can quickly identify people who might be good in particular roles. Keep in mind, and we're going to talk about both succession management and talent inventories and career planning and so forth in a later video further on along in the book. Keep in mind that the talent inventory sounds like a great tool, and it is a great tool. It makes it really, really easy to quickly identify people that have certain characteristics, but it is a real bear to try to develop. It's quite probable that when you sit down to create a talent inventory, certainly it's easy to get all the people, but figuring out what the columns are, you go through their application forms and you go through their performance appraisals and you create columns for all these things, and you go, I got a great database, and then we hire 3 people. So you got to go in and you got to add those 3 people and put in that information in all those columns to the right, and then you have people leave and you got to remove them from the database. And then you say, okay, great, we need somebody that has the ability to make an oral presentation effectively. It's like, great, that's not in our database. So you got to go back to all those 200 people and figure out how to populate that column. It's a real big ordeal to create that thing. But once it exists with the information that you need, you only have to go in and update it. If they've gone in and initially had a bachelor's degree and somewhere along the line they got a master's, you go in there and you update that to the master's degree. And you make little tweaks here and there, and you add a column every now and then with some information that you didn't really have. But it's a great tool. Another way that we can look at people internally is through employee development. It's kind of like succession management, except perhaps it is a little bit more from the perspective of what do you want to do with your career and with your life. And it's giving you the training that you need to be able to develop the skills for future roles. We can do that through leadership development programs. That was a really trendy thing a decade or two ago. In fact, when I first left GSW and went to work for the hospital, my role was a leadership development coordinator. And that was the hot trend of taking folks who were in lower levels of management, or perhaps not in management at all, and helping them understand the concepts of leadership and management to where they could become managers or leaders for the first time, or become higher level managers or maybe more effective managers. Another way that we can develop our employees is through having them cross-train to other roles. And at first, as a worker, we say, I'm good at my role, I like what I do, I don't want to be training on how to do somebody else's role, because we don't always think about the big picture. The reality is that I'm good at this role, but I could be replaced in this role. If I know 3 or 4 other roles, it's harder to get rid of me because I can do so many different things. I remember back after the tornado at Sumter Regional Hospital when I was working there, I had a friend who's a nurse, and he was in a role where he did long-term care planning for folks. So when they were in the hospital as patients and they were getting ready to be discharged, he worked with them on whether they go to a nursing home or whether they go home with in-home help or different things like that. And I remember one day after the tornado, he and I were talking. He was working that particular day in the urgent care clinic, the temporary ER as such that we had. And he said, what do you see is happening with this the tornado and the recovery and whatnot? And we were in the process of talking about whether we needed to lay some people off and whatnot. He said, I'm kind of worried about my job. And I was like, man, if either one of us needs to be worried, it's me. because I'm the leadership development coordinator, or I'm the manager of education, or whatever it was at the time. And that's not really all that critical. When I look at you, my friend, you could be an ER nurse. You could be an intensive care nurse. You have the ability to be the manager of the shift. You have the ability to work with these patients for continuation of care. You have got a whole bunch of different roles that you're capable of doing. And if I'm senior management and I'm looking at somebody to remove that makes $40,000 a year or whatnot, I'm going to remove the one that cannot help me as much in the big picture. And that's me, not you. So you have much more job security than I do. And I guess I was kind of a prophet at the time, because here we are 12 years later after that conversation, and he's still with the hospital in that same role doing a whole kind of different things, and I've had 2 careers since then. So cross-training is really, really important from both a management standpoint, because you got a lot of people you can turn to in terms of trouble, but also from an employee standpoint, because you are much more valuable to the organization. The third way that we can develop our employees is through job enlargement. Job enlargement, as you remember from both organizational theory and behavior and principles of management, is the idea that we don't really change your title, but where you did have this small circle of activities, we're making larger that circle. We're giving you new things that are similar to what you were already doing. It's not moving into something totally different. Cross-training is going from accounting into marketing, which are very, very different things. Job enlargement is within accounting. We're giving you other accounting types of roles. So you're still in accounting, but you're just doing different kinds of accounting things. Great way to help people gain new skills. And if we're thinking in terms of who do we need to eventually become the manager of accounting, it's much more logical to say somebody who knows all of the different components of accounting. So as we enlarge your sphere of activities or knowledge, you become more attractive as a candidate for the manager of accounting. The next thing that we can do in terms of internal recruiting sources is job posting systems. That's kind of the old-fashioned put a note on the bulletin board in the employee break room that has the open jobs. Today we have internets or intranets where we post our jobs, and people can go out there. You can either stand in front of the bulletin board and look at the jobs. Everybody goes, you're looking for a new job, ha ha. Or you can go to this online system at home, and nobody knows that you're looking for a new job. Your boss doesn't know that you're thinking about changing to a new job. But a job posting system, whether it's a piece of paper on a billboard in the employee break room, or whether it is an intranet page that you can click on and list all the jobs, is just simply a system where we can let the folks who already work for us know what jobs we're looking for people to fill, so they can see what they're interested in. If there's one they really like, they can apply for it. But it's self-promoting in a sense, that I think I like this, I'm going to put my name in the hat. Nobody's asked me to do that. Nobody's come to me. No manager has said, hey, would you want to think about applying for this job? It's simply that I saw this thing and it looks interesting and I'm going to pursue it. Job posting is a great way for current employees to kind of move themselves in the direction that they want to go. Job slotting is a variation of that, with the change that we're not opening this job up to anybody who's interested. Job slotting is a concept where there's a position that's open, and a manager says, you know what, Susie, I think would be really good here. So I'm going to just kind of informally move Susie into this role without really making it public. I'm not going to go through the process of having a whole bunch of people apply and going through the process. If I do, it's really just kind of for show, because I've already pretty well decided that Susie's the one who needs to be in this job. The problem with that, it's very quick if we've got somebody that can move right away, but it can be a problem because people feel like it's not fair. The procedure that we go through to fill this job is not fair, so procedural fairness is probably very, very low, in addition to the distributed fairness being low. But where that comes into our advantage is if we've got a really, really clear candidate. I remember not too terribly long ago at my church, we were looking for a pastor, and at the time our music director, who'd been with us for a long time, was interested, kind of felt like he was being led, so to speak, into a preaching role rather than a music role. And he had kind of served as a little bit of an interim pastor in the meantime. developing his skills, public speaking skills, and study and research skills to be able to deliver sermons. And we really weren't interested in opening up a full-fledged search with a committee to bring in people to look at potential pastor candidates. We really liked this guy. So we had to go through the process of amending our church bylaws and constitution to create this as an option where we could just immediately appoint someone to a position without going through the traditional processes. And it was a really, really hairy thing trying to get this thing to do and getting people to buy into it. And we had to set it up to where the process was a very rarely used thing, that really only applied if there was somebody so head and shoulders above anything else we could think of, that we knew this person and we really trusted this person, that we could skip this process. And we could then, in effect, slot this person into this role without going through the process. Another example of that is that in 2012, when I was working in Albany at the Phoebe Putney Health System, the role came open here on campus to teach HR. And when I initially inquired to Dr. Wilson about job opportunities at GSW, because my role at Phoebe Putney was coming to a close, she said, I was looking at the GSW Foundation Executive Director, and she said, well, you could do that, but I've got something in mind that you might like better. Let me check on it and get back to you. And it was the role that I'm in right now, at the time, the Assistant Professor of Human Resources, that was tenure track. And when she called me back, she said, yeah, we've got a faculty position open to teach HR, and I think you'd be perfect there. You already know what we're doing. People kind of know you. You've got the personality for this. You've got the detail level for this. So what I want to do, Dr. Wilson said, is kind of target you for this position. And I've got to open up an official job opportunity and invite people to apply. But I'm not really going to consider anybody because I want you. And that's an example of job slotting. And, a couple of days, a week went by, and she called me up and she said, listen, you understand that this job basically is yours, but you do actually have to apply for the thing. So go out there and put in your application so that I can close the search and make the appointment. I was like, yeah, how stupid of me. I got to at least apply for the thing if there's a possibility of getting hired. But the idea of job slotting is that occasionally you are absolutely certain who you want in this role, and you don't want to have to go through the process because you know that you're not going to get somebody that is like this candidate that you've already have in mind. So you slot them into the job without really going through the process, or maybe half-heartedly, just for show, going through the process. And again, notice that it could be real grounds for discrimination. Especially if you've got a lot of white guys and you're slotting a white guy into this role, because you're not going out and looking at minorities. The last thing that we want, next to last thing we want to talk about in terms of internal recruiting sources is employee referrals. And that's where I, as an employee, maybe as a manager, but maybe as just a regular old employee, have a role in your organization. I'm the leadership development coordinator, and I see that this PR director, marketing director, PR director, let's say, role is available, and I'm not in the least interested in that, but I happen to know that John in the warehouse is really got that background. He went to school and he did marketing and did all this stuff, and he came in as a warehouse clerk simply so that he could get a job and work in our company, but he's not really suited for the warehouse clerk. He'd be great in the PR director's job. So I suggest to Marcus, or whoever this is, that he apply for this job. And so you see in the bullet point here, current employees like me suggest other current employees like Marcus who might be capable of doing this job. And so I don't have any really pull in the process, but I can tell the folks who are looking for the PR director's position to be filled that Marcus over here in warehouse would be a great candidate because he's got the background and seems to be a good fit, and that he may be coming to apply, so please consider him. And then at the same time I go to Marcus and say, man, you really ought to go do this. It'd be a great opportunity for you. So employee referrals. The last thing is a replacement chart. That is a diagram that we create. It maybe looks like an organizational chart where you have the box with the title and somebody's name, and then below that there is a box with a title with somebody's title and name and whatnot. But the difference with the replacement chart is that maybe we've got in the school of business, soon to be the College of Business and Computing, we've got the Dean's Box with Dr. Wilson's name in it. And she's not going anywhere anytime real soon, but eventually she will. Eventually she'll retire. And so maybe we're thinking in terms of succession management about who might fill that role. So underneath her box, there's a little line, and there's 3 or 4 other boxes with people's names. And in that box, let's say that perhaps I'm one of those names who might be the dean after Dr. Wilson retires. In that box with my name, it's got my current title, it's got some notes about whether I'm ready to step into a dean's role or not, what my strengths are, but also what things that I'm lacking in that I need to be working on to be ready for that dean's role when it comes available. So the combination of succession management and replacement charts is a good combination of tools to use to be thinking about the people who currently work for us, to be helping them develop the skills that they need to be moving into new positions, but also to look at it not from the perspective of the person and where they could grow, but from the position and who might come up. Again, succession management is looking at you and where you might go. Replacement charts is looking at a position and who below that might move into it. Both of them require a lot of planning, a lot of forethought. It may be that we're thinking 5 years down the road with our succession management in terms of where you could go, and also in terms of our replacement charts and who could fill this position when it comes open in 5 or 10 years. But the overall theme of this particular video lecture is that there are a lot of people who already work for us that would be great in different roles. And if our goal is to develop people and to keep people and to minimize our turnover, we've got to be proactive in the process of thinking about what people might do. Well, that's a really good overview of internal sources. Now you've got one little segment of ways that we can find people to fill an open job, so that when we get ready to do the next piece of this class, which is the recruitment plan for your job, you can think about where we might look internally to find people to fill this job. The next 2 videos will be looking at people who don't work for us right now, external candidates, and where we can go to find them. So stay tuned for those, but that is all for now in this video, and I hope that it has been a good use of your time to hear me talk about these different things, and that as a result of this, you understand these things a little bit better than you did. Maybe even have a concept that you'd never heard of before that you're thinking, yeah, it's a pretty good idea. I'll keep that tucked away somewhere in there so that I can pull it out again in a couple of years when I need it. Anyway, hope you're having a good day. That's already involved a little bit of learning something new, and you're ready to move on to the next big idea.